Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Opportunities, yes, for an oil pipeline to get to Tidewater.
The Prime Minister says a new pipeline could be the kind of nation-building project Canada needs. But BC's government has other ideas.
The projects that we're going to be bringing forward are about clean energy and critical minerals.
Plus,
we're on time to have it open in 2027.
big delayed dig. The province shows off its work on the Broadway subway as other projects go over budget and over time. Also,
May is just over and we have 15 backups in care already.
from an orphan trio to a cub in a pillowcase, a wildlife rescue center is taking care of a lot of young black bears, and that's not necessarily a good thing.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Prime Minister Mark Carney is asking Canada's premiers for nation-building project ideas, from pipelines to trade corridors. The nation's top leaders are working on ways to strengthen the Canadian economy in the face of U.S. tariffs and the talk of making this country the 51st state. The CBC's Marina von Stackelberg has details on the proposals and the positive vibes so far.
Love is in the air.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford crooning alongside Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. The relationship between the provinces and the federal government hasn't always been loving, but they're trying to make it work, especially as Canada aims to build a stronger and more independent economy as it faces down U.S. threats.
The leadership around this table of developing truly nation-building projects. And this is just the start. This is just the start.
Prime Minister Mark Carney asked each premier to come with their pitches to fast-track infrastructure and energy projects. Smith wants pipelines to move Alberta's oil to the coast and to new markets.
This is not just an ideological argument. It's not just a minor disagreement. Oil is by far the most valuable export for Canada.
But a pipeline would likely need buy-in from provinces along the route, like BC and Quebec.
First, I've been invited here by Mr. Carney, not by Danielle or whoever.
Quebec has historically opposed those projects, but Premier François Legault says they'd look at the proposals.
We need to see what's the economic impact for Quebec, what is the impact on the environment.
The premiers have other projects they want Ottawa to approve or fund. Quebec and Newfoundland and Labrador have plans to transport their hydroelectricity to markets in Atlantic Canada and beyond. And Premier Doug Ford wants money for nuclear reactors and to mine critical minerals in Northern Ontario.
We're going to be an energy superpower around the world. Those are our strengths, and we're going to make sure that we deliver that message, and I know the Prime Minister feels the same way.
Carney has already promised to remove any federal barriers to internal trade by Canada Day. Those restrictions have often made it easier to trade with the U.S. than between provinces, costing the Canadian economy as much as $200 billion a year. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
To a different project now, one that's caused big traffic tie-ups, but one urban planners and politicians all agree will be worth it in the end. The BC government is showing off its work on the Broadway subway, the SkyTrain extension that will add 6 new stops in Vancouver. But as Justin McElroy reminds us, it joins a long list of provincial projects that are over budget and delayed.
It's one of the oldest tricks in the government playbook. Give a politician a hard hat and say the following line.
We're on time.
That was Transportation Minister Mike Farnworth, standing in the ongoing construction for the Millennium Line extension from VCC Clark to Arbutus Street, showing progress and expressing confidence in the project. But what does on time really mean?
We're on time to have it open in 2027.
Of course, when construction began 4 years ago, on time was originally supposed to be this year, before being pushed to 2026 and then to 2027. But no more delays, says the government. And the $3 billion budget is still being held to, they say. And they made no apologies for the timeline.
As with all projects, there's always challenges. There's issues that will come up just because of the nature of the location and events that do happen.
And events do happen, but they seem to be happening a lot to big transportation projects in Metro Vancouver. The new Patello Bridge was originally supposed to be finished in 2023 and is still not finished. And the SkyTrain line to Langley has already added a year to its completion date, from 2028 to 2029. But an event like this is about pointing out the positives, and Farnworth was focused on when this project will open.
This line alone will be able to carry in at any one time more than 3 times the capacity of the 99B line. So it's going to be a significant improvement in terms of people's ability to commute.
And that is true. But will a line that stops at Arbutus Street fully solve the biggest congestion problem in our bus system? Here is a chart. It shows the 10 busiest bus routes in Metro Vancouver last year, and the top 4 all go to UBC. It means that whenever this project is done, eyes will turn to an entirely new round of raising money and consultation and construction to keep the line going west. But if that seems like a long timeline, at least it's not the Massey Tunnel. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
A wildfire east of Fort Nelson has now closed a section of the Alaska Highway, with traffic being redirected at Highway 77. The Alaska won't be open until at least Tuesday morning.
It was first reported to us on May 28th, a very small area in the backcountry, several valleys away from the highway, and then overnight on June 1st to 2nd, it experienced quite a bit of growth.
The Northern Rockies Regional Municipality has issued an evacuation alert along the Alaska Highway from Summit Lake Campground to Steamboat Mountain Brake Check. The Summit Lake fire is 21 square kilometers large and growing quickly. The northeast of our province has seen very little rain, and there are dozens of fires burning in the area, some of them even holdovers from last season. And with a warm, dry spell ahead of us, it's a stark reminder for people to be prepared for fires that could flare up at any time.
We really have the next few weeks to hope for some rain to make sure that our ecosystems are fully saturated and bring fire danger down. But we also know between now and the end of June and then into July, August is really the telltale period where we need to be paying attention to fire danger and making sure that we're not causing accidental fires.
Let's go to the weather expert, Darius Madavi, here with our first look at the weather and that fire danger rating. That is a big red map.
It is, yes. Although it is better than it was at the end of last week when pretty much all of Alberta and Saskatchewan was bright red. A little bit of improvement there, but temperatures are expected to climb again, and low pressure up over Hudson's Bay is generating some pretty gusty winds over the next couple of days in parts of the prairies. Although things here in BC a little bit more calm, not windy, not really stormy, at least not today and tomorrow. However, definitely looking for those temperatures that are expected to climb over the next few days. We're not really seeing much cloud here on the south coast today. Over the next few days, some cloud may build in at times, but nothing more than some showers for the North Island. And Dan, temperatures climbing very quickly as we head into the end of the week.
Okay, thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
BC's minimum wage is now up by 2.6% to $17.85 an hour. As Tanushi Bhatnagar reports, though the hike is the smallest in years, it's still hitting some small businesses' bottom lines.
My entire payroll on Monday goes up 2.6%.
Nicole Burke runs a catering company in Vancouver. With BC's minimum wage increasing 45 cents on June 1st, she says between the cost of supplies, taxes, tariffs, and mandated wage hikes, it's hard to stay afloat. The new base pay in the province is $17.85 an hour, a change that matches the rate of inflation.
We lead with our heart, not with our wallet. So we want to give everybody as much as we can. And we also need to make enough to keep the lights on.
This year's bump is the lowest percentage increase since the government tied minimum wage to inflation 4 years ago. Experts say on its own, it shouldn't affect small businesses much.
The impact is going to be fairly small in my view because it's 2.6%. It's just the rate of inflation.
It settles down and there's no real job loss, and it doesn't really crater a lot of businesses unless those were businesses that were precarious and maybe likely to fail anyway.
Some say the increase is good news, and others say there's room for more.
This little change, I don't think it will have that much impact on anybody's lives.
It's not a lot, it's not enough, but at least it will help.
But with costs piling, advocates want the province to step up.
BC businesses are calling for support to help them to be able to afford this change, to help them to be able to deal with all of the unpredictable changes.
A rise in costs means two choices for a small business like Imel's Catering: either absorb the costs or raise the prices.
If we're already operating at a razor-thin margin where we are just floating, we can't absorb it. But if we don't absorb it, we lose our client base. So do I lay people off?
That's the tough choice that many small businesses will have to make. As for this catering company, they've decided to stomach the costs for now. Tanushree Bhatnagar, CBC News, Vancouver.
As Nanaimo grows quickly, so does its student population. The school district says its facilities are bursting at the seams. But as Claire Palmer explains, an old school will get a refresh this year.
It's been 7 years since students walked these halls, but in September, Rutherford Elementary will welcome back K-7 students.
We're in a really fortunate position. Many other school districts in BC are also similarly full, but what we had was an empty elementary school. So instead of needing the funding to build an entirely new school, we're able to fund refurbishing Rutherford Elementary.
Robinson says schools right now are sitting at 106% capacity, with enrollment continuing to increase each year.
Schools that weren't built for that number of capacity, that puts more pressure on time in the library, time in the gym, and as well we're seeing having to turn away kids in kindergarten for their catchment schools.
I think it's really important to get as much active participation during the school day, and when they only can go in the gym during the winter 2 or 3 times a week, I think that's actually a really big detriment.
Linder says her oldest went to Rutherford before it closed in 2018, and she's happy to see the school reopen, and her youngest is excited to start.
There's like 2 fields, and they're both really big fields, and yeah, there's a 10-foot basketball hoop, not a 7-foot basketball hoop. That's much better.
However, Robinson says capacity issues still loom as they anticipate high school enrollment to increase as elementary students start to graduate to the secondary level, and warns that Nanaimo District Secondary, the second largest school in the city, is falling into disrepair.
It was built in 1952, and our facilities team has done a wonderful job of keeping what's there in great condition. It has original tile, original floor and spaces, and they're doing an amazing job trying to keep it, keep it in one piece.
Robinson says a provincial project to increase capacity at Wellington Secondary will hold the tide for now, but the board is hoping the province will have a plan to replace NDSS and increase its capacity in the coming years. Claire Palmer, CBC News, Nanaimo.
A wildlife rescue center in Smithers is having a record season. More than a dozen black bear cubs are being cared for by the Northern Lights Wildlife Society. As the CBC's Jennifer Norwell shows us, that's not necessarily a good thing.
May is just over and we have 15 bear cubs in care already. That's the first for us.
Since the group was founded in 1990, the Northern Lights Wildlife Rescue Society says it's never seen this many injured or orphaned cubs this early.
Last year, a lot of the bears did not have cubs because the previous year was so bad with the droughts and the fires and everything. So nature has a tendency of making up for those events.
In Williams Lake, the group was called in to help a litter of 5 cubs after their mother was shot at the end of May.
There were not, 1 or 2, but 5 cubs with her. I asked several times if they were sure. So finally they sent me a picture.
Volunteers managed to rescue 3 of the cubs and are now using thermal imaging to try to track down the other 2. And that's not the only unusual rescue this spring.
I had a call from a gentleman that he had picked up a bear cub from the highway near Trail, BC, and currently was holding her in a pillowcase.
That little bear, no larger than a stuffed teddy, was taken to a clinic in Nelson, where it was discovered she had a badly broken femur. The group opted to do surgery on the bear, now named Gimlet. She's been moved to Smithers and is recovering nicely.
It's just a joy to be around. She's just such a little bear cub. She's the smallest one we have right now, but has a great appetite and a great attitude.
While Gimlet gets stronger, the team continues to hope to reunite the full Williams Lake litter soon. Jennifer Norwell, CBC News, Kamloops.
A community rallies for the family of a young boy killed in a crash in West Vancouver. We'll have that story next. We're learning more about the family of a 4-year-old boy who was killed after he was struck by a bus near the Horseshoe Bay Ferry Terminal last week. His mother is still in hospital. The CBC's Leanne Yu has more on the growing community support.
This is the last photo Silvana de Oliveira Charam sent her husband, Clineo Mercado, an hour before tragedy struck. She and her 4-year-old son, Leonardo, were on their way home to Vancouver from a day trip on Bowen Island.
Silvana thought it would be a really fun thing to take Leonardo to Bowen Island because it was so nice out.
But while waiting at the bus stop, the unthinkable happened. Police say around 3:30 p.m. on May 28th, they responded to reports of people pinned under a bus outside the ferry terminal.
Little boy lost his life. Little boy lost his life.
Teresa Morrison and AJ Caridi say Mercado has worked at their pizza shop for 4.5 years.
He started with us just after they had Leonardo.
They say the couple immigrated from Brazil and tried for years to start a family, calling Leonardo their 1% miracle baby.
Nossa, tá andando sozinho.
Ah, Leonardo is, I mean, just look at the picture. He's like his dad. His dad is the kindest, giving soul on the planet. And look at that little boy's face. It's glowing, it's beautiful, and that's a testament to his parents.
Morrison and Caridi say they've been visiting Mikado frequently since the deadly crash and are now raising money to help cover Leonardo's funeral costs, his mother's medical bills, and to fly family in from Brazil to support Mikado as he takes time off from his 3 jobs to be by his wife's bedside.
She's fighting for her life, for sure.
They say Mikado is processing the incident with compassion.
I would be angry. He's not angry. He's a beautiful spiritual man. He's worried about everybody else, as always. He's worried about the bus driver.
Last week, West Vancouver police said a TransLink bus driver is being interviewed, adding the investigation is in its early stages and a criminal offense has not been ruled out. Here in Horseshoe Bay, it's a busy day at the transit terminal. Locals are still coping with the shock of the incident by taking moments of reflection at the growing memorial site.
I put the plastic on it just because it was going to rain, but I think it's nice for a 4-year-old kid. So this is what I bring, yeah.
Daniel Perrant was at a cafe nearby when the collision happened and hasn't stopped thinking about the victims.
Still in my heart. It's really difficult.
Leanne Yu, CBC News, West Vancouver.
The family running a BC ostrich farm ordered to have the birds killed because of avian flu concerns may consider trying to move the animals to the United States. Katie Pasitny with Universal Ostrich Farm in Edgewood says it would be a last resort, but notes that American officials, including Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., have made proposals to Canada about saving the ostriches. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency argues the roughly 400 animals must be killed because the avian flu infection at that farm was from a mutation of the virus not seen in Canada before. The families claim the ostriches have developed herd immunity. The CFIA says the farm is also facing a $20,000 fine for failing to quarantine and kill the birds. There is the view from Kamloops, where temperatures were in the low 20s earlier in the day. But things are going to heat up all week, and along with that, the risk of fire. Daria says your BC-wide weather forecast coming up.
I think it's important to give a human face to the stories that we hear every day, the people that they affect. And I think talking to those people is what really gives us the true sense of the impact of the stories that we're hearing.
I'm Stephen Quinn, and I love living here in Vancouver, BC. It's a city with world-renowned beauty, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. In our new daily podcast, This is Vancouver, we're exploring the diverse range of issues and stories in the city, the good, the bad, and everything in between, as told by the people who live it every day. Don't miss This is Vancouver, available wherever you get your podcasts, and I'll talk to you soon.
Court has now been adjourned until next Monday in the trial of 5 former World Junior Hockey players accused of sexual assault. Lawyers for the Crown and defense are set to make closing submissions beginning in the new week. The CBC's Ali Chiasson has more from the courthouse in London, Ontario.
They rest their case. All 5 defense attorneys wrapped up today. The Crown had no further submissions, so that means they all take the rest of the week to prepare their closing arguments, which begin on Monday. Still, though, today did have some interesting testimony to tell you about. Dan Brown, the defense attorney for Alex Formanton, called up Detective Lindsay Ryan. She led the second investigation in the case that resulted in the charges against the 5 accused hockey players, all of whom have pleaded not guilty to sexual assault. Brown asks if she did a criminal background check on their client. She did. He has no criminal record. They chose to end it there. Carter Hart's lawyer does pose a few questions to the detective, honing in on the difference in EM's demeanor in 2018 talking to police and years later. Detective Ryan says that in the 2018 statement, EM appeared to be, quote, self-blaming and not sure if what happened was wrong, while in the Hockey Canada statement, she seems to understand how she felt and that what happened in that room was wrong. Detective Ryan attributed that to 4 years going by and EM being able to process and reflect with the passage of time. Another interesting point came up from the Crown asking Detective Ryan about EM's reaction when she was informed that they would be reopening the case. She said the complainant was quite upset, and the detective took that to mean that she was reopening old wounds as well. And to that, we heard some of the accused family members gasp, even scoff. Then we were waiting to see whether Dylan Dubé or Cal Foote would testify for themselves like Carter Hart did last week, but their counsel opted not to call any witnesses. Foote's lawyer, Juliana Greenspan, said they're holding the Crown to their burden of proof and left it there. So what will these closing arguments look like? For more on that, we spoke with Christopher Sharon.
Judge-alone closing submissions tend to be a little more businesslike and efficient. That doesn't mean you can't add a little bit of flourish, but it tends to be fairly businesslike. It is truly the opportunity to present the picture that you think is the best picture of the evidence to the judge in a succinct, coherent, persuasive form.
Closing submissions start Monday. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, London, Ontario.
Back to our top story now. Alberta came to the Premier's meeting with the Prime Minister with a long list of demands. And officials say they have a good reason to get some accommodation since they say they're pulling their fair share. The CBC's Andrew Chang breaks down the numbers.
We all know Alberta is resource rich. Its economy driven by oil and gas. But does that wealth, the energy, the jobs, the revenue, make Alberta the economic engine of Canada?
In recent decades, Alberta has been an engine of Canada's prosperity.
The economic engine.
The economic engine.
The economic engine.
Even today, this is a claim you can find right on the Government of Alberta website. It's also a frequent argument of the separation movement, which believes Alberta oil is the tireless workhorse of Canada's economy. But is this true? And what explains how we can ask an expert and get an answer like this?
So Alberta historically has the highest levels of real GDP growth, highest levels of real GDP per person.
But then ask a couple of other experts and get this.
So if we're just looking at GDP alone, no, it's not the engine.
Alberta doesn't stand out with an unusually strong contribution, at least in recent years.
So let's look at numbers, yay, and how they can be interpreted differently depending on what point you want to make, starting with the granddaddy of all numbers when you're talking about economic anything. Alberta is home to one of the largest proven oil reserves in the world. According to the government, they're sitting on somewhere north of 150 billion barrels of oil. That potential is tapped every day, but what's it worth? Looking at GDP is how we can start to answer that question.
Think of it as the total amount of income that is generated each year for individuals, for businesses, and so on within the province.
Right, and if oil is key to your claim of being the horsepower of Canada, you're probably pulling in more dollars and cents each year than any other province, right? Except, let's look at the actual ranking. With the lowest GDP nationwide, the territories, followed by the Atlantic provinces, and the prairies making up the middle of the list. But then, a huge leap into the most productive provinces in Canada. British Columbia is number 4, and can you guess who number 3 is? This is actually where you'll find Alberta, short of Quebec at number 2 by about $100 billion, adjusted for inflation, and the number 1 spot, and it's not even close, Ontario, by a big margin. And we can look at these same numbers in a slightly different way as well. If we take all those bars and mash them together into a pie, it's easier to see what share of Canada's GDP each province pulls in. Alberta's piece of the pie, just over 15%. So, one might ask, what kind of engine only produces 15% of the drive? Well, one might answer, that's not really a fair way of looking at it.
When you're looking at aggregate GDP, it can be very misleading because, for example, Ontario has more people being productive.
Yes, what we've looked at so far is incomplete because Alberta's 15% share of GDP might actually be pretty good. Let me explain. If we unmake the pie and switch back to bars for a moment, this is every province and territory's share of Canada's GDP. But compare this performance with their share of the population, because this might give us a different sense of whose production is impressive. Because Ontario literally has more than triple Alberta's population, so we should expect its GDP to be much higher, right? But based on population, we can identify all of the provinces who punch below their weight. That's Ontario by a hair, Quebec, Manitoba, and most of the Atlantic provinces. As in, you would expect them to make more money, considering how many people they have. Then, take a look at Alberta, which overperforms. In this sense, easily the most productive province in the country.
GDP can be impacted by A, being more productive, or B, simply having more people. Alberta punches above its weight on GDP per person.
It isn't by itself the biggest single provincial contributor to the Canadian economy. That belongs to Ontario. But for the size of Alberta's population, 5 million people, it contributes about 15% to the Canadian economy, and that's a bit of an outsized contribution.
And that outsized contribution matters in at least one very important way. Okay, you might be thinking, so Alberta's not the most important province, but considering their size, they pull pretty impressive numbers. Why might that make Alberta the economic engine of Canada?
GDP per capita correlates very, very strongly with average income levels of individuals, average wages, average hourly labor compensation.
Yes, and follow me here. He's saying there's a relationship between what we've been talking about, so Alberta's impressive GDP per capita, and how much Albertans make each year. This stat is important enough for Alberta to want to track it very closely, partly because it's a pretty strong selling feature if you're trying to market your province, but it's also a reminder that people with high salaries pay high taxes, and tax revenue spills over into the rest of the country. You're welcome.
In the last 11 years alone, the net transfer from Albertans to the rest of the country was $240 billion. That's a personal contribution to Canada of $55,000 from each and every Albertan.
A number of politicians, especially from Alberta, have made this argument over the years, and it's based on this graph showing which provinces receive equalization payments from the federal government. The Atlantic provinces, Quebec, Ontario, and Manitoba. They all receive often billions of dollars a year that Ottawa takes in as tax revenue and then hands out to provinces who can't raise enough taxes to maintain a certain standard of services. So things like healthcare, education, daycares, that sort of thing. Quebec is easily the biggest beneficiary, receiving last year more than $13 billion, which, by the way, is more than what every other province received combined. Alberta, on the other hand, while it does receive health and social transfers, it's gotten nothing in the way of equalization payments, specifically, for the last 60 years.
Ottawa will take our tax dollars and they'll redistribute it in a way to make sure that PEI can deliver the same services as Ontario, BC, or Nunavut. So in that sense, then, Alberta probably pays more in taxes to Ottawa than they get back in services, in part because Alberta's income is higher than it is in the rest of Canada on average.
So from 2007 to 2022, Albertans made a $245 billion net contribution to federal finances. Ontario and British Columbia were the only other net contributors, and Alberta's contribution was 5 times that of either of those provinces.
So if you only look at equalization, it does look unfair, but it's not meant to be that everybody gets the same from equalization. It's meant that equalization sort of shores up those who have less in the way of revenues.
So, is Alberta the economic engine of Canada? Maybe, especially if you consider that federal top-up Quebec got last year, that equalization payment. It was almost 10% of Quebec's total government revenue. For some provinces, the payment's more like 20%.
Albertans do contribute, make an outsized contribution to the Federation, to the rest of Canada.
Now, in the time we have, we can't consider absolutely everything that makes Alberta economically important. But there is more to say about the single most critical feature of Alberta's economy that sets it apart from any other province in both a good way and a bad way. What Alberta does better than anyone else in Canada, without exception, is bring in outside money. Oil and gas together are the #1 Canadian export by a country mile. Alberta is also a hub for petroleum refining, with the overwhelming majority of all exports going to the United States. Tapping into American money is an important driver of Canadian wealth, and the US is an important customer to have, with almost 10 times Canada's population. But this is also where the strength of Alberta's economy becomes more complicated.
We're spending hundreds of billions a year to take care of Canada. We lose in trade deficits.
This graph shows how much of each province and territory's economic output is tied, both directly and indirectly, dependent, really, on the United States. Alberta is in a class of its own. And that makes it much more susceptible to outside forces like price shocks for oil.
Alberta can have exceptionally fast growth and it can have exceptionally large collapses. It lives and dies by non-renewable resources.
And Albertans have viscerally felt this boom-bust cycle in the late 90s.
As world oil prices continue plummeting, Alberta is expecting the worst.
Now oil prices are hovering just over $15 US a barrel, the lowest level in 4 years.
Then, around 15 or so years after that,
companies are cutting back on hiring and investment, and the plummeting price of oil means the government's energy royalties are tumbling too.
And then COVID was a whole other nightmare. Here's the going rate of Canadian crude over the last 20 or so years. At its peak, trading well over $100 a barrel. Those were good times. But during bad times, like when the pandemic destroyed the world's economy, oil worth just a few dollars a barrel. This has meant one very simple thing. If Alberta is the economic engine of Canada, it's an engine that does not always run at peak efficiency.
The boom period that we saw prior to 2015 just hasn't been there. And so Alberta's contributed over those years, the past decade, roughly less than 9% of the total. And Ontario and Quebec combined to account for nearly 2/3. So the larger provinces, of course, tend to contribute most to economic growth, but Alberta doesn't stand out with an unusually strong contribution, at least in recent years.
So how do we answer this question about Alberta's relative importance to the country? Well, look, it's complicated, and there are so many other considerations that we haven't touched on, but Alberta is undeniably important. And during these uncertain economic times, it's still easily one of the biggest cogs in the machine. Boom or bust.
A massive effort underway in Manitoba to get people out of communities threatened by wildfires. That story's coming up. Stay with us. As wildfires rage across Western Canada, thousands of people are on the move. But finding space for all those evacuees is proving tough, with some having to travel as far as Niagara Falls to find an empty bed. Cameron McIntosh has the details.
Airlifted to safety, the military has now flown about 3,200 people away from northern Manitoba's wildfires, including hundreds from Puckatawagan, Matthias Colomb Cree Nation.
So far, I've only had maybe 3 hours, 4 hours of rest since we left Puck.
Mary Sylvia Caribou leaving on just a few hours' notice, now living in a temporary shelter at a soccer complex in Winnipeg.
As long as we have our food and water, everything is fine. Yeah.
Similar scenes in Peguis First Nation, the hockey rink, now a shelter.
Can I talk to Caitlin?
Beverly Scatch happy to be here with her young grandson, now trying to reach her daughter, a firefighter who stayed behind.
I'm so proud of her. She's doing this for her kids too and people back home.
In Manitoba, about 17,000 people are out of their homes, another 8,000 in Saskatchewan and about 5,000 in Alberta. Figuring out where to put everyone, now a big challenge. Manitoba is sending some evacuees out of province. These evacuees being put up in Niagara Falls.
Just lucky to be here, to have a spot, to have a bed.
Not everyone is happy. These evacuees protesting outside the First Minister's meeting, calling Manitoba's fire response unorganized, as some Manitoba chiefs call on the province to use emergency powers to clear more hotel space.
They don't take Red Cross evacuees, and it's unfortunate. And our people have experienced that, and they don't need that. Our people do not need that. They need to be afforded the basic human dignity.
Manitoba's premier says more room will be found.
Let's face the facts. Nobody wants to sleep on a cot for more than a day or two, even in an emergency situation.
As the fires spread, it's likely there will be even more evacuations. Back in Peguis, Beverly Scatch sees tough days ahead.
I have to be strong though for my grandson.
The fire's still out of control. It could be weeks before many evacuees can go home. That's if they still have a home to return to. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Well, you might say all the world's a stage. We've heard that before, especially at Caravan Farm near Armstrong, where a theatre company is offering kids a chance to practice Indigenous storytelling in nature. Here's the CBC's Shelley Joyce.
Could be a mountain, but he must be a mighty boulder.
Indigenous storytelling, land-based learning. Two of the priorities for these kids on a desk-free day away from their elementary school in Salmon Arm. This is like the mother of all field trips. From live horses to creepy old barns, theater props, and wide open spaces. 80 acres of field and forest to learn about and explore.
Start walking to your spot.
Tira Menzies knew her class was ready for this experience.
They actually really, just sort of understood the concept of storytelling beyond reading a book, writing a story. It was beyond words. And so I thought, well, they get it. We've got to come out here because this is where stories are born in different ways. Theatrical stories, improvised stories, stories with animals. And so and Indigenous learning is a big deal at our school too. I hope they will learn that they are all storytellers. That's kind of where we ended up. I asked them, I said, well, then are you a storyteller? And they realized, oh, yeah, I am a storyteller. I don't have to be good at written output to be able to be a storyteller. It can be an oral story. It can be something that happened to me on the weekend. Anything that is their experience that connects them to either a place or a person makes them a storyteller.
Write it down. Look. Well, I was never really a writer, but I like being outside in nature. It feels like I'm connected to the land more when I'm writing, and it's nice being out here and it inspires me a lot.
It's good to be out in the nature and be with our friends and have fun. It's a better place to think for me, because being in the nature, you have a lot of space to think, and it's not crowded like a classroom or a room.
They looked at the trees, they thought about the animals. We are on the traditional unceded territories of both the Secwepemc and the Seal-Okanagan people. This is our third year doing field trips at Caravan Farm Theatre, and it's grown every year, so more and more interest, more and more excitement. We hope that kids will take that they can find inspiration anywhere. I mean, we have a particularly inspiring piece of land, which is why theater has been produced here on the land. Sometimes we use horses, so we've really incorporated the land and nature into our storytelling since 1978. But, they can find inspiration here. They can find inspiration in parks in their own neighborhoods. They can find inspiration in their communities. So getting them in the storytelling mindset.
Even for the kids who may not see themselves as writers, the sun and trees have worked their magic to bring out the natural storytellers on this 80-acre farm.
I just love being in the sunny sun. It's just so nice in the nature. And the land really connects to my heart, and I really love it.
Shelley Joyce, CBC News, Armstrong.
Still to come, we'll tell you about a bit of a sticky situation that created some buzz down on the U.S.-Canada border. Plus, Daria says your full weather after this.
I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC inbox.
Check out CBC News BC, your local streaming channel. It's a free ad-supported TV channel available 24/7, delivering breaking news, weather updates, daily headlines, and sharing stories that matter to British Columbians. Stream your favorite CBC programs like The Early Edition, BC Today, and On the Coast. CBC News BC is available on connected TV platforms.
The weather update is brought to you by BC Cancer Foundation. Support BC Cancer Foundation by leaving a gift in your will and join our 90-year legacy of driving life-saving innovations.
Darius Madavi is here with the BC-wide weather forecast and that fire map again. Lots going on.
Yes, lots going on. We've got fires happening all over the country, and the perimeters aren't loading in at the moment, and it's frozen. So,
oh, wait. A day of technicalities. That's okay.
Yeah.
Can you talk us? Yeah, that's all right. Are you able to talk us through perhaps the situation in BC right now?
Yes.
We know we've had fire up around the Alaska Highway, and then we'll.
Yes.
What are we expecting in the
We've got a number of fires up in the northeast that we're watching, and extreme fire danger is still happening up there because of those high temperatures, because we have that ongoing drought situation and a lack of moisture going on for several days now. Watching out for thunderstorms, some thunderstorms happening across the interior over the weekend, looking out for more of those this week because we've got a ridge of high pressure that is set up over the Pacific and stretching into the province. That is deflecting any weather systems up to the north of us and really keeping almost all of the province pretty dry. A few showers coming to the north coast over the next couple days, but other than that, really just dry conditions and sunny conditions right through the week across BC. In the south, temperatures are going to keep climbing a degree or two each day as we head into the weekend, when temperatures here on the coast could reach as high as 28 degrees, and for the interior as high as 34, 35 degrees. Looking out for that heat, Dan. And then other than that, really, it's unfortunately an easy forecast to do without maps because it's just sunny skies and climbing temperatures.
All right, Darius, thanks very much. But before we go, we've got a few other stories, and they're animal related. There was a buzz in the air yesterday after a crash in Washington State near the Canadian border, and we mean that literally.
More than 10 million bees were set free after a semi-truck transporting them overturned. The insects swarmed the area, so officials were forced to call in bee experts to handle the situation.
Good call. They eventually recovered the hive boxes, which allowed the bees to go back home. Officials say most of them had done so by this morning. But the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office says there were 70,000 pounds of beehives that this thing was carrying. I mean, you look at that. Reports of sheriffs diving into their trucks or in their cars, like unreal.
It never occurred to me I thought you were going to say 7,000 pounds of bees.
No, 70,000 pounds of beehives.
Yeah.
Right? You can see it going over there, and that is a very rural area. And so we don't know exactly what happened with the crash, but holy moly, and they're valuable, right? We keep talking. You've talked about this, about how valuable bees are when it comes to pollination, right?
I'm still just.
I know.
Of all the loads you don't want to overturn with, I would say bees is really up there.
Yeah.
Wow. Where is this exactly?
This is in Lyndon, Washington, just over the border between like Abbotsford and
right.
Lyndon, Washington. There you go.
Quite a cross-border delivery.
No, they're not checking their passports for that one.
No.
There we are.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast with, hopefully, next time, working weather on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And we'll have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Good night.